Good morning, everyone. Good morning from North Carolina. And it may be afternoon or evening where you are. And in fact, our guest today at Mind Over Matter Monday, our guest teacher is Charles Caldwell, and he is in Hong Kong, which makes it about 11 o'clock, 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And I am Leslie Flowers, and I'm so excited that you are here. And let me just welcome our dear Christy Williams. Hi, Christy. You're the one little person coming in right now, and I'm sure there'll be more coming in right now. So let me put on our banner. I'm really thrilled. There's Lata. Hi, Lata. So good to see you. You guys, I'm so happy to be here today, and really excited about this last quarter coming up of 2026 and what's coming right around the corner from this year into next. And I know you've noticed how quickly time moves the older we get, right? So, gosh, I can hardly believe that we're nearly to Q4 in 2026. It's amazing. Good morning, Leigh Scheidel. I'm so happy that you're here today. And Leigh, I know you're over on YouTube. If you wouldn't mind dropping in the link, just in case Linky Land isn't playing nicely today, you can always catch this over on YouTube. And I thank you in advance for doing that. You're fantastic. Lata, remind me where you're from. I cannot recall off the top of my head. Hello, Wendy Ule. You're in Mexico, but you're a Canada person. So I see that you skipped right over the United States for vacationing and went to Mexico. How life changes, right? So I'm Leslie Flowers, and this is Mind Over Matter Mondays. And as you come into the room, I want you to know that the purpose of this particular show that I do each week is to reinforce the basic concepts of personal, professional, and leadership development. And that includes a whole array of different topics, some of which will resonate with you today. Some of them didn't resonate with you until today. So we're always growing in conscious awareness of our potential. And so how something shows up for us, or a teacher or a concept shows up for us maybe a couple of years ago or even a few months ago, is likely to sound completely different today because you're not the same person. So if you ever think, I already know this and I've heard it before, allow me to share with you that was the old Leslie that shared that, and that was the old you. And now your possibilities are even bigger, even greater. So look at everything with curiosity, big new buzzword, curiosity, right? Very important to outweigh your fears. A deep curiosity will help you do something that you're afraid of or you failed at. But that's heart-centered. So we talk about the mind here and the body and the nerves and all the systems. But the point here is for us to understand the concepts well enough to internalize them and have a practical application, a practice where these things become part of your character. And we know that repetition is the way we embed faith in our ability and in our deservability. But we have challenges. And so that's what we do. There is Linda Meyer and Lisa Fevick. Let me say hello to both of you. Lisa Fevick, you're featured this week in the Weekly Carousel. If you're a person that wants to do a live stream every week or every other week, there's a group of us that produce a weekly carousel to keep up with all the live events here on LinkedIn. It started so that we could stay here and learn and maximize our time. Thank you, Lay, for putting in the link to YouTube. Good morning, Linda Meyer. We have a number of guest teachers, and Linda Meyer is one of them. I'm so happy to see you. She's our narcissism observer. She's the girl who will tell you if there's a narcissist next door in your family, at your school, in your church, and then what to do about it. And Lisa Fevick today at 5 p.m., and she does this every other week, Menomorphosis Dialogues. It's a live stream panel where Lisa and her guests attack all different kinds of challenges for the menopause years. And if you're a man, or you've been through it, or you've got years until you hit it, there are people in your lives that are plagued with over 100 potential symptoms that can last up to 30 years. So Lisa, who is also a nutritionist, right, and a registered dietitian, she also helps us with our food and eating good food. Thank you, Lata. Lata, this is my 60s hair. And actually, I'll tell you a little story about today. So most of you know that I love astrology, and I've loved it since I was 16 or 17 when I first learned about it. And it's only been in the last 10 or 15 years that I realized all the great thinkers, eons and eons ago, really followed what the planets were doing. And I didn't understand how it worked, so I didn't pay much attention. But now I know that just because I don't yet know and understand how something works doesn't mean it's not working. So when I got that insight, I realized that we can have empirical evidence. We can see the evidence ourselves with not understanding scientifically what's going on. But boy, once you get it scientifically, you're on your way to the moon. And that's where I want us all to go. Oh, there's Sharon Rose Winfield. She is also a guest teacher. She's our SQ expert in the guest teachers group. That's spiritual intelligence. Yes, conscious curiosity is the starting point for metacognition. And we're actually going to get into this a little bit. Yes, I'm happy that Charles is here too. Okay, excellent. There's Kimberly Lechnick. Hi, Kimberly. Good to see you. I missed you last Friday. You must have been doing something exciting, for sure. So you may wonder what I'm doing, right, in this 10 or 12 minutes. So one of the things that I realized after COVID, when everybody kind of hunkered down, and they were by themselves. Now, I was already retired. My ex and I laughed about this because all our lives, we worked 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. And our dream was to have Fridays off, right? When you would schedule a Friday, so you had a 3-day weekend. Oh, I mean, scheduling those was the best. It was really the best. But what we've realized is after COVID that we were already on our own. I was already alone working in my office. And I have family around me, but not everybody does. And get Kimberly to tell you a wonderful story about the man who nobody talked to for 2 weeks until Kimberly showed up nose to nose with him. So I realized that a lot of times I need acknowledgement, not so much anymore, but there was a time when my fear of not being smart, not having enough confidence had me really second guess myself. And so I realized that we needed someone to recognize that we were there. Yes, you were attending a leadership conference, I remember. So people need to be seen. People need to get gotten. They need to know that you see them. So my favorite thing to do is to acknowledge every one of you. And I've taught myself through thought mechanics how to automatically look for your greatness, because you probably know that our natural default is what's wrong, right? Like on the stage, if someone is wearing 2 different colored socks, or the shoes don't match the belt, right? Or the cleavage is too low, right? We're always looking for what's wrong. because we've made those mistakes. So it's very natural for us to project and find the things that we've done wrong, that we aren't crazy about ourselves, and pinpoint them in somebody else. But you can, and that was through repetition, but you can also make the default through repetition, through a practice where all you see is the good. So that's what we're doing here. That's what I do each week when we begin. Let me go back over to the comments so I don't miss anything. We're going to move right on. Let's just see what our dear Sharon Rose. There are no accidents. Sacred geometry is a universal design pattern, including the sky. So if you look behind me, people always ask me, what is that logo? Years ago, when I had proper branding done, people who knew me exactly, everything I did, took my classes, knew me out in the world, they designed this. This is the flower of life. And there's your geometric patterns. That was what they came up with after getting to know me. So, all right. I think it's time to bring up our guest. It's 11:13. Oh, look who's there, Bobby Lee Clark. Hey, Bobby Lee. Bobby Lee, Thursdays, 12 noon Eastern, does a great 30-minute show called Money and Mindset with his partner in business. For this live, the co-host, I don't want to say this, I don't want to make any mistakes of how I'm speaking, right? There's so many different innuendos for every word these days. Be sure you check in with Bobby Lee and check and see if he doesn't have his violet scene and his violet shirt on. Very classy. All right, so I think it's time to bring my wonderful friend up here, and your friend and my friend. And here he is. Let me move this too wide. Hey, Charles, how are you?
I'm well. How are you doing, Leslie?
I
Thank you
am
for having me.
absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to do something a little different today.
Yes.
So Charles, first of all, let me tell you guys about Charles. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the banner. So we're not using the PowerPoint for a number of different reasons. And Charles and I have background that aligns and folds. You know him as an executive coach in HR. And actually, I'll tell you just a little bit about him. I'll read you a couple of things in case you haven't refreshed your memory. But
Uh-oh.
his background is diverse. All right. So I know him from Landmark Education. I know him from LinkedIn, but we connected through both of us having been involved with Landmark Education. And why is that important? Because today, with our topics, the part of this first part, and maybe even the second part, is going to bring up the concepts behind Landmark and the mind, right? And so since this is my thought mechanics is my thing, and Charles knows what I do, and I know what what Landmark did, we're going to talk about this in a very different way. But that isn't who he really is in the world. He operated running that business in Toronto, but he has his diverse background. He's serving as global senior HR executive, and that equips him with the unique insight into the challenges of leadership. So it really helps when you've already done it yourself, right? And you've made all the messes, Charles, right? So that
Yes, it helps
you,
to have a few failures behind you.
and then you recognize those failures, right? That you've had
Exactly.
in
Yeah.
others. That is how this all works. That's why we look for, so you have the unique, it's actually metacognition, your ability to think through, okay, which point of view or viewpoint fits best here. So you actually observe your thinking styles and patterns. And so you have a unique ability to do that. And he said he's for 35 years, he shaped HR strategies that aligned with business vision, built high performing teams, and led large scale change, mergers, and acquisitions across industries from tech giants to international education institutions. Well, that's a lot. So, Charles, what does that mean? What are you doing that you love now that you are, right? You're no longer, well, tell us what you're doing now and tell us what you're doing with all these years that really floats your boat, that really pleases you, the work that you're doing now? Please, won't you?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you.
Sure.
I have a long career in HR, human resources, as a senior executive, and I wasn't
Mhm.
always a senior executive. I started off my career in human resources as in learning and development, and was involved in a couple of training companies, which led me into Landmark when I was back in Canada. And it was actually Vancouver. I was running the Vancouver, what they call out of
Sorry.
area. But I started in Toronto, and Landmark shipped me to Vancouver after a year, and I ran Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, Victoria. And so I'm really passionate about helping people make a difference in their lives, about people seeing the potential in themselves. And if you were to ask people about, what do I think about other people, they'll probably going to, one of the data points you're going to get is that I tend to see the good, the potential, the positive in people. I don't always see the negative. Now, that means that when it comes to large corporations, I'm very poor at navigating politics. That's one of my Achilles heel. I'm not good at that. But have learned along the way a few things. But regardless, what I'm doing now is I'm working with senior executives. Actually, a lot of people have asked me what my niche is, and I don't at this particular point necessarily have a niche. My niche is really helping people unlock whatever potential they have in them. But I work with early career graduates. I'm a part-time, they call it a visiting lecturer, but I'm a part-time part of the executive coaching and part-time lecturer at university here in Hong Kong. And then I also work with middle career individuals who often have been passed over by their company. And they've then opted to get to invest in their own career coaching or executive coaching. And then I have a number of clients where I'm working with the CEO equivalent, whether it's an MD or a CEO for Hong Kong or for the region, or for the organization, and doing coaching and also organizing leadership retreats and providing HR and business consulting. And the
What it
startup
sounds.
space right now in Hong Kong is really hot. So I have a number of startups that I'm working with.
Ah.
Yeah, don't
Now,
believe
let
the
me ask
headlines.
you, let me ask you something though. It sounds like you have a whole lot of wonderful opportunities, lots of things going on, really positive things. Are you challenged at all? Because I remember you said you've moved into your own consultancy. I hope it's fair
Yep.
to say. Yeah. So are you having challenges since you've done this and now you're doing all these different things in service to others, managing your time and overextending yourself?
Yeah, great point. Well, the first thing coming out of corporate that I underestimated was how much my body needed to recover from corporate. And I don't mean that in a negative way about corporate. It's just that when you're in that kind of position, the last company I was in had about 3,000 employees, more if you counted part-time. And, there's a certain space that you hold, and I had underestimated how much capacity uh, of how much of my capacity was drained. And the first 3 or 4 months when I left corporate, I would be hit with waves of fatigue and exhaustion, and it took me a while to get over that and kind of look after my well-being. And it's true that now I guess you could say I'm a solopreneur, and I have one or two people that kind of work with me ad hoc to kind of help things along. But you're right, I don't have a huge team with me. One of the benefits of most of my previous jobs, halfway, the last half of my career, is I had huge teams. You'd think of something in the morning and it'd be implemented by the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And now
Mm-hmm.
it takes more to do that. Yeah. And I'm
Yeah,
in the building phase. So obviously, have goals that I'm striving towards, and am there in some places and not there yet in other places.
got it. Got it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. So let's talk about our what we're going to do today. Now I can actually show everybody this, right? So you feel comfortable because you see this, right? But we're not going to use PowerPoint
Yep.
today for so I'm just going to remove this right now. Oh goodness, there we go. Are we back to I don't know if we're where we belong. Are we
There we are.
Interesting. So it's defaulting to what it wants. All right, no problem.
Yes.
So let's go ahead and begin. And why don't you set the scene for this, how we got into the conversation of mind. I think it was on your show. Now, keep in mind, everybody, if you're up 11 p.m. Eastern, and earlier as you go west, right? Charles has a live show, Horizon X, Wednesday at 11 p.m. Eastern. So
Yes.
I think that's where this conversation kicked off. So why don't you lay it out what we're going to do today with mind in mind and our commonalities with mind and the distinctions in different ways of looking at mind, and then how to upgrade the conversation. So take it away, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely. So the first part is going to be a conversation about the two parts. One, well, first of all, the mind, and then the second part of the conversation, want to introduce a distinction from my work, or introduce a concept from my work with Landmark that might be helpful for people, so and contributes to previous conversations that we've had. But where this started was a couple of weeks ago when when I said, come to the stage if you're around, everybody, and you came to the stage. Thank you very much for doing that, Leslie. And I also want to take a moment to thank you for the contribution you are to the community. And you talked about, we and the carousels, but actually what people might not know or appreciate, it was actually Leslie and the carousels. And then and you pulled the community together through the carousels that you put together once a week. And you've really supported people who wanted to go live and help people grow who already are live. So really, on behalf of the community, I know that everybody would thank you, and I thank you for the difference you make. It's really, really very selfless of you. It's a huge contribution to a lot of people. So thank you.
My pleasure.
And so a couple of weeks ago, you came to the stage, and we were talking about coaching. And I think I was talking about what does effective coaching look like. And you asked me to address how does typical coach training talk about the mind versus the brain. And there is neuroscience in a lot of coach training, but there's not a lot of talk about the mind. And then that conversation on that LinkedIn Live evolved, and then we actually got into a conversation about, well, in the transformational work for companies such as Landmark Worldwide, how do they relate to the brain versus the mind? And that was kind of where we landed on a couple of things that we could bring up today. And one of them is that I think in the beginning, when Werner was first talking about the mind, he didn't really talk about he didn't really distinguish between the mind and the brain. He related to the mind as a machine. And that is
Wait a
really,
second. Wait a second. So Werner is Werner Erhard.
oh yeah.
Tell him who he is.
So Werner, Landmark Werner Erhard and Associates turned into Landmark Worldwide when Werner stepped away. So he went off to do some other things, and then Landmark went off or continued on its own under his distant leadership. But it was basically he would contribute when he came up with new ideas. So he's the individual who pulled together much of I would say, like to use the term training technology, but it's the training concepts of Landmark.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Awesome. Continue. I interrupted you, but I realized that they may not know who Werner is.
Sure.
And
Yeah,
he is a
valid.
person who created this whole body of work.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of how, I mean, it's quite powerful.
Yes.
Right. And effective. But
Yes.
just like with Think and Grow Rich and things that are coming up, there's a lot that wasn't known. So please go on.
Yes. And the other thing, just to add a note about how well respected Werner is, there are a number of business schools out there, including the Harvard Business School, that refer to Werner as the grandfather or one of the grandfathers of the modern management theory. And I don't know if he's still doing it now, but as recently as the last few years, he was continuing to do lectures and talks and contribute to the Harvard Business School, other well-known business schools in the US, and also they have worked on a transformational program. I don't know have the name of it on the top of my head, where they bring it into companies. So you can go onto YouTube and look at lectures that are as recent as just a couple of years old, where he's been interviewed and in conversations. So how he related to the brain was that the mind is a machine. And when he said that the mind is a machine-like system that records, orders, and stores past experiences, I think that's a combination of the brain is the machine, but it's the mind that is recording, ordering, and storing past experiences. And he believed that seeing the mind as a machine, which is that reflection piece, allows one to operate with exactitude, and that perspective contributed a lot to his work. And he also argued that the mind's fundamental purpose was survival. And because of this, a lot of mental ideas were and processes were oriented towards accumulation, leading to a belief that more is better. You're always trying to push more, and that the mind would never be satisfied, and it always pushes for more. But he would also argue that the mind is not your true self. He said that when you're constantly pushing for more, you're not in touch with a true sense of satisfaction and aliveness. And that recognizing yourself as a being rather than just a mind was the goal of his work, was to have people recognize themselves as beings, not just the mind. And so that's kind of a summary. Now, that doesn't really take us back to what were contrasting on our coaching conversation, which was on my LinkedIn Live, which was the brain versus the mind. But that was kind of how he related to the brain.
Yeah, and there's some validity there, absolutely, because his system was missing things we know now, but that didn't make it ineffective at all, because Landmark and training always uses the repetition, which is the fourth principle of success, auto-suggestion. There's a lot of truth in this, and there's a way to separate, for example, what he didn't talk about was the conscious and the subconscious. So at that point, he was unaware. And even Napoleon Hill, who was long before him, did distinguish brain from mind quite effectively, but he didn't know the difference between the subconscious and the conscious mind. So he lumped everything together in the subconscious, right? And Werner Erhard lumped them all together with this lack of awareness that there's really there's
a machine at play. Yeah.
Yes. And then the brain, it takes direction from the mind initially, right? So the changes in our brain and all those chemical cocktails, as our friend Catherine talks about.
Yes.
I mean, so there was missing information, but with what we're doing now, we can actually see how it works, that it does, and also what's missing, the presence of which would make a difference. Back over to you.
That's right. And so one of the things that he said would operate in the subconscious was this kind of repository of past stories. And you would have this kind of survival programming and stories from the past that would constantly perpetuate. And one view of the mind he had was that the machine was a storytelling machine, and that limited us going into the future. So one of the things that happens when you do Landmark's work is you start to see how, and I think that he would argue also that those stories and the things that are limiting you from the past live in what he would call what you don't know that you don't know.
Right.
Whether that would be the subconscious, I don't know. But it would live in what you don't know that you don't know. And the purpose of his work was to enable people to step out, look at themselves from the outside, and see their experiences and see their stories at play and how they were limiting them in their lives, so that they could move forward informed by the past, but not limited by the past.
What I think is so interesting, in many companies, there's a fair amount of hypocrisy right?
Yeah,
And
really.
so this, yeah, yeah. So um, the very thing that we're doing now through repetition is what they use to build their business.
Hmm.
So through some pretty tough methods of impressing, it reminds me of in 1973, Patty Hearst, the granddaughter of William Randolph Hearst. I'm sure you remember this. Was kidnapped by the Symbionese Liberation Army. You probably don't
Yep.
remember that part of it,
Oh
right?
no, I remember it very well. I watched
Yeah.
it. I was at that age where I watched it very closely every morning on the newspaper. Yeah.
So this is the even landmark in its own intelligence and its concepts used the concept of repetition. Now it's either positive or negative. It's either brainwashing or it's building faith in our ability and deservability. Basically, that's where we're going. We're either going with negative, you can't do it, you failed so many times, right? And that is the story that lives like the truth. Even
Hmm.
though we may not, well, now we understand why those stories and how they got built. And in my work now, we build the antithesis, just like you
Hmm.
said, looking for the good in
Hmm.
everybody else. Oh God, where was I going? Well, I'll just send it back over to you because I forgot.
Okay, no problem. But yeah, that's so the similar in with Werner's work and Landmark, you are, I don't know if it's building the antithesis to that, but I guess you are in a way building the antithesis to your stories. But the key thing is that you complete your stories so that you're informed by the past, not limited by the past, and then out of that, you actually have the freedom to create your future. And
Let me ask
that,
you something. I
yeah,
just remembered what it was. So
okay.
in the advanced course, so it's all about this story. Okay. And there was
Mm,
this exercise, Charles, and I know you'll remember, and everybody just this is the this was so incredible to me. So the advanced course is after the forum, so you going a little bit deeper into the originating incidents. Anyway, we had to write down one of the stories in great detail that we've been telling ourselves.
mhm,
Oh, that I'm not smart enough, and here's all the reasons why, and all these people thought that I wasn't smart, and compared to everybody, like big long stories that we had about our lives. I'm not worthy. Right, here's the proof. Anyway, the exercise was that we had to write this out in great detail and then read it to another person
mhm,
and then
mhm.
read it again. And because it's very emotional as when you begin reading it, right? Because it's right there, right on the screen of your mind. And they had us read it so many times until it lost its luster.
Mhm.
What was that? Because I've never been able to figure out. It is through repetition, and I think it's permanent or close to permanent. It no longer has the pizzazz. I mean, maybe it's after an old relationship when the thrill is gone. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, there's a couple of purposes of that exercise. One of them is it gets an individual to externalize the story. And just by writing something down and externalizing it, I mean, you will know, you've often said, and when I make comments, oh, X percent, only X percent of people have specific written goals, you've reminded me, written down on paper, not written down on a mobile device.
That's
So
right.
if you, so yeah, that's part of it, is that you write down that story on paper, you get it outside of your head, and then you start telling it. And it's a combination of you hearing yourself telling it, but it's also you watching the reaction of the people who's listening to you, which quite often in the beginning could be, yeah, okay, yeah, interesting, wow, wow, that happened. And then
Yeah.
after time four, it's like, is it the break yet? Right? When are we finished here?
But it did get rid of it. It
Yes,
did. It
absolutely.
did. So with Patty Hearst, she was locked in a closet in a very short period of time with loud music and everything about the SLA and why they're so great. Within a very short period of time, she brandished a rifle and went out with them, right? And this is what happens during brainwashing, right? So through that repetition, she began to believe that, just like with these stories, through the repetition, they lost their charge. But it's the same process that we're using when we look for the good in other people. It's the polar opposite. It's one of the universal laws. Wherever there's negative, there's going to be a positive every time. And so we default to the negative because that's what we have the most experience with. The work that we do right here and kind of pulling things apart and looking in between and distinguishing things is building our mental muscles, our conscious awareness of having insights, things becoming clear that weren't before.
Absolutely.
Which is right, which is that it's that what you don't know yet, but then you will learn more. So then you know more. Back over to you, my friend.
But I think that it's a different type of brainwashing that we're talking about here. I used to joke with people who asked me about what it was like to do the form. I said, it was kind of like having someone go inside your head and clean it up with a fire hose. That was, if I didn't have time to actually sit them down for 10 or 15 minutes and explain it to them. That was one of the things I used to say. But yeah, that exercise in the advanced course is very effective. And one of the things that goes along in parallel to that is challenging what people consider reality and not reality. What creates reality, and that because people relate to their stories and their narratives as real, and they're not. Right? There's the facts of what happened, and then there's everything that we make up, the interpretation that we make up about it. And we often, the two circles collapse in together, and then we relate to those two circles collapsed as the reality. But
it is reality for us because the collapsing of the meaning has the negative, low vibration. So it takes over. The fact is, this happened. Boom.
Yeah.
But then we, as Landmark always said, we're meaning-making machines. We're not happy until we make something mean something, even if it's wrong. We believe
right. It. Yeah, that's right. Exactly it. That's exactly it.
All right. So should we take a look at, are we ready to move on to upgrading
Let's move on, yeah.
Okay. Well, then in that case, I want to take a break for our sponsors.
Sure, please go ahead and do that.
Okay, thank you.
They're important, and thank you.
Well, it is, and I love our sponsors. Listen, we have two of the most amazing sponsors here. Let me shut this down temporarily and get over here. So this is the first one, and this was our first sponsor. And honestly, Stanley Green is the president and CEO of Power Thinking Corporation, cognitive-based personal development program that now is available on your app instead of calling in and instead of getting on LinkedIn. You can visit his 2 affirmations every day to keep your mind in a place of growth and potential. If you go right now to where your app store is, where you purchase, there is, you can have a complimentary copy of this for a month and evaluate it yourself. Okay, now there's one more thing I want to share. So give me 1 second to do this. Power Thinking Corporation, I've been involved in it for a couple of years now, and it's a really wonderful support. It's very different than what I teach. But what it does is it allows you to take what you know and relate what you're learning to that, which expands your understanding, right? It really, it's like a fertilizer. Things get much clearer. You grow in awareness. Well, let me just get to this. Okay, so our next sponsor is, I'm so happy to have the 2350 Effect and the network, which started here, and they've got something great coming up in October. So have a look at this. Well, there we go. That is,
Amazing. Is that a
it's
virtual
really
or
fun.
in-person
And
summit?
listen, it's virtual and it's on a very interesting, different platform. It's a Zoom platform, but it's very different than what you know Zoom to be, and it's a lot of fun. And this is the third year, I think the sixth telesummit they've done. Phenomenal. The tickets are on sale now at creativelivingideas.com. You can get there, or you can go to the 2350effect.com. You can reach out to me, but right now I believe they're $75 for 2 full days. Absolutely phenomenal. And this year, I usually speak, Charles, but this year I'm going to moderate one of the panels,
Oh,
and
excellent.
I'm their gold sponsor. So I totally believe in what they're doing, and I've had a lot to do with it um, over the years, and very happy to do so. So those are our wonderful sponsors. What's Sharon Rose saying here? Oh, she's telling a whole story. We default to the negative because we are scanning for danger. Yes, yes, yes. Our biology is ancient and primitive. Rewiring is sophisticated. The mechanics of our mind. I trained in intentional behavior unless you had the great fortune of being raised in a family who operated that way and it was installed in you as a child. Yes, I can't disagree. So shall we let me get the banner back up here so we can move in. Is there anything else that you want to say regarding the first part of the conversation to close that loop? Like maybe we talk about it again sometime? I don't know.
Sure, we can. I mean, it's a conversation that could go on for a long time. I think we've just scratched the surface, but I think it's helpful to have that discussion and for people to see what are some of the differences.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So if you like this conversation about the distinction between mind and brain, and also, guys, you've been listening to me, right? I am still annoyed. And remember that out of frustration, very often comes change.
Hmm.
So is the frustration enough to have you focus on it? Well, it is for me in a way, because I am super frustrated with conventional training, which excludes the mind,
Hmm.
even though the mind and the way it works, visualization and all that, was long before Freud and Jung. But for whatever reason, people that are trained as therapists, in my experience, do not distinguish the mind from brain. They give the brain all of the accolades. But the
Hmm.
reality is the only way you're going to change it yourself without a therapist, right, is to and I'm not going to put down therapy because I've been through it myself in a number of different ways. um, but this is something that we can learn to do ourselves by teaching ourselves to look for the good, by realizing that what we think the most frequently and how we feel when we're thinking it is always going to match your results. Whatever you're thinking about the most will be on the other side. And so right now we get a lot of negativity. I don't want any more bills. And what if they break up with me and I'm not smart enough? And maybe I'm not the one to start a live event, right? That story, you believe it. So what is it that what we're doing here is giving you access to exactly what you're thinking repeatedly and how to counter it. To it's building faith over fear, faith in your ability and your deservability. Okay, Charles, next. I mean, you just go on forever. Your turn.
Yeah, my pleasure. So one of the things that happens as you get further into transformational work is one of the concepts that gets introduced is the idea of upgrading a conversation. And
Mm.
you when you're doing enough work on yourself, you tend to, even when you're in the positive mode, you're in flow, you tend to still get into a bit of the automatic way of being, and it requires a certain amount of intentionality, a certain amount of deliberateness to really create change and create transformation in your life. Otherwise, you might invent a new set of possibilities and be excited working on new goals, and you're operating as if you're operating as if you're informed by the past, not limited by the past, and you feel great about that. But there's still an element of automaticness that will creep in, and even
Yes.
those new things will become automatic. And so the idea of upgrading a conversation is looking, one of the exercises that you can do is you can look at your life as a network of relationships, but not unnecessarily. We tend to look at communities. It's a little bit like communities, but getting into the granularity of communities. We tend to look at communities as clusters. This is breaking down all of your relationships into who are those actual individual people. And you actually do a mind map. And there's no fixed way of doing it, but the way that I like to do it and the way I did it at the time was I did a mind map. And as you start spreading out from people that you are connected to, and you might come up with maybe 25 or 30 people in your first go, you realize that a significant number of those people, time has passed since you last talked to them. It could have been a couple of days, could have been a couple of weeks. In some cases, it might have been 6 months or a year. And even though, and that they're just sort of out of sight, out of mind. And this, and including at work, and that would include, it would surprise people when you looked at your business networks within an organization. You might think, wow, I haven't talked to Joe in a long, long time. And yet here we are kind of working on this joint project together at a distance. And the opportunity was to upgrade the conversation, upgrade the relationship, or upgrade the conversation about the relationship. And that involves, first of all, you have to understand what that network of relationships is, and then you would rate, that line between me and another person, or then another person and another person. You would rate, how is that relationship going right now, and you have about 3 questions that you would ask yourself about the last time you talked to them, the quality of the relationship, do they know what you're up to? And a lot of times people don't know what you're up to. And it's helpful to actually go out there and tell them that what you're up to. And part of this exercise of upgrading the conversation was mapping out a network of relationships, assessing where you're at with each one, and then you would identify areas where there were gaps and there were opportunities to enhance the relationship. And that was what we were calling upgrade the conversation. Same thing in relationship to, so there's people, but there's also in relationship to individual things. So people might, instead of saying, wow, I need to transform my relationship with money, or I need to change my relationship with money, or fix my relationship with money, or I need to change my relationship to work, or fix my relationship to well-being. Instead, they'd have a much more empowered conversation about it, where they would say, I'm going to upgrade my relationship to well-being. And it takes on a very different look when you look at it in that particular way. So I've talked a lot, so I'll stop for a moment and give you a
Well, how
chance.
about why don't you answer this question? What Hey, Barb, thanks so much for asking. What causes some people to rise above a negative past and be positive, and other people to crumble? Any ideas?
Yeah, I think one thing is community. Community has a really big impact on being able to rise above. And, if you're walking into a situation such as a toxic work environment, for example, that's a great example, that a toxic work environment can cause people to crumble. And even if you have champions around you in a toxic work environment, then that can, even then with positive people, they can cause you to crumble. But if you feel that you have things that you can control, also being able to separate yourself from a toxic work environment, recognizing that not everything is work, but work is just, you can always look at it like your life is a portfolio. And most of us look at work as 100% or 95%, and the rest of our life is 5%. If you look at your life like a diversified portfolio, you have 20% work, 20% well-being, 20% family, 20% friends, 20% your LinkedIn Live, right? So, or whatever it is, right? Whatever your hobby is, whatever you're passionate about, and that helps you to load balance things like a toxic work environment. And those sorts of things will help you to rise up out of a negative past and avoid crumbling. And it also takes an amount of conviction and commitment to change.
I was going to say that you have to be ready and willing
Mm-hmm.
to change. Like it's one thing
Yes.
to say, oh, it would be nice to change, but I mean, it has to be the one thing you're working on. I look, Kimberly brought this and I thought this was interesting. Be transformed by the renewing of the mind. Romans 12,
Yeah.
2.
Yeah, very good.
None of these things are new,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yep.
And the more of these references to the Old Testament, the New Testament, to the Bhagavad Gita, right? To the Tao, to any philosophical or religious book, I would say, is going to have these universal laws. And even here, they're talking about mind, yet we can't get mind, into our curriculum. We've got people that, I mean, I've spent 20 years understanding how to create new stories through biomimicry by following how the crummy old ones started and then distinguishing the process, making it really clear, and then ready and willing, pick one thing and then do it repetitively.
Yep.
Right. But it's all with what you think. Right. And
That's right.
Catherine Chadwick and I have discussed, and there's still this, the thinking can actually induce the body to react through repetition where you don't even have to think about it anymore. So it's really interesting. Let me see what else is here.
100%. Yep, I agree with
Look
that.
at this. Now, here's another juicy thing. Look at this. This is our spiritual Thoth, and the Emerald Tablets from ancient Egypt explains the universal laws and the intrinsic power of self. Sovereign beings are impossible to control. That is why mainstream education doesn't share this information openly. Beings are impossible to control. Well, yeah. All you can control is what you think. Okay. Thank you. That was awesome. 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 All right. Let's see if there's anything else. Here's another one. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flows the spring of life.
Yeah.
Yes.
And having a diversified life portfolio is a good example. Is Proverbs 4:23. You're protecting your heart from that toxic work environment.
Yeah. All right. So let's wind up today's conversation with the mind in mind, where we're going to go further, right? We just don't know exactly, right? Yep. But then in upgrading the conversation, I have a question for you. When we were in self-expression and leadership course, we did something like you're talking about, and we drew a tree. This is what I used. I don't know if anybody, I think we all did. And then each one of the branches represented a community. Yes. Right. So you kind of reminded me of that. It really, makes you realize, oh my God, I have 6 or 7 communities that I've neglected. But here's the thing. A lot of times we need to let people go. So you've got a lot of people in those branches that you've outgrown, or they've outgrown, or, a reason, a season, a lifetime kind of thing. Is that considered in this exercise of upgrading the conversation? The conversation? What do you do with those people, or just let them go?
Well, I think one thing you might ask yourself is anything being resisted? So you might have an individual where you are, constantly trying to get together on a regular basis, and it never happens. And, months have gone by, and maybe what you should just do is tell the truth about it and say, well, we're friends and we'll get together at the Christmas parties and we'll have a good catch up then, or whatever parties, right? Thanksgiving. And that's an element, I appreciate all that you're doing, but we're not catching up as often as we said we would. So we shouldn't say we should. Just, see you at Thanksgiving type of thing. And that's okay, and have it be okay, and be mature enough to accept the relationship as that. And that's a form of letting people go, but you're doing it in a way that honors the other person and honors yourself and says what's so.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as we're just about done here, so I wanted to ask you, what is one final thing that you would like to share with the attendees today? One thing that we should remember that really is top of mind for you right now through this conversation, because we've hit a lot of points. What is it that is floating to the top for you to share?
Mm, two things. One is to really be deliberate about enhancing those conversations with people in your life. Really, take a moment. Even it doesn't take long, 5 or 10 minutes. You can do a quick map of 25 people,
Mhm.
and then look where you have opportunities to enhance those relationships and upgrade those relationships. And then part of that conversation is I'm, right now, all my goals are legacy goals. I don't work on a goal unless it's a legacy goal. Life is temporary, unfortunately, but ideas are permanent. And what legacy ideas do you have that you'll leave on this planet that will have permanence? And everyone makes a difference. Everyone has something unique and special. Everyone has a gift. And how are you going to make sure that gift lasts?
I love that. Charles, thank you so much for being here.
It's
We're
my
coming.
pleasure.
Oh, this was so good. I want you to come back. I love these
You
conversations,
know I will.
but it's late at night for you.
That's okay.
So
That's okay.
thank you everyone for being here. It's just been amazing. Let's see what Kimberly says here as we're finishing up. Yes, yes, it is. Absolutely. I love that. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to bring this back up here just briefly to tell you that on Friday, what we're doing is I'm transitioning into 2027 with thought mechanics. We're saying goodbye to Think and Grow Rich as my only area of expertise, because we're going to get into thought mechanics, which is engineering in the fifth dimension. And of course, it's going to include universal principles and laws, but it's also this Friday big on visualization, really getting into. We're going to look at Genevieve Barron's work. I believe she wrote it in 1927, Your Invisible Power. Once you get visualization, your life will change. And we're going to talk about metacognition, all of these really good things. So this is Fridays at 11 a.m. and we're transitioning right now. Also, if you would like to be, thank you, Catherine, if you would like to go live, 5 weeks, 5 hours, in 5 weeks, you will be up live. I'll be your producer. It's short. We'll do it very quickly. It's $500. You'll learn all the technical parts. Now, look, there are other people who go deeper. This is for the person who's ready to start a live every week or every other week that has the content, maybe only 30 minutes, no guests, just understand the technology so you can focus on what it is you're teaching or sharing. And then we'll set up a very nice little funnel for you. So you'll have something to tell people to do. After all, we have to tell people what we want them to do. Speaking of which, before I close out here, and I want everybody to go to Shawn Michaels' live show here, what do you want people who are really ready to make a change and they would like to work with you? But keep in mind, everybody, that you are ready, right? This is it's not a social conversation. But Charles, tell us a little bit what they can expect, and wait until you're ready and willing before you reach out to him. But please go ahead and share this in a better way than I did.
Sure. Well, people can reach out to me and contact me through LinkedIn. And I usually have an exploratory call in the beginning to figure out what people's goals are and what they want to achieve. And then I will coach people depending on what stage they're at, what season they're in, to help them level up and upgrade themselves and go to that next level in their life.
Absolutely. And the most successful people invest 10% of their annual income on this kind of a thing, on personal development. Now, of course, you can always, if you're not ready or willing quite yet, you can always see his show at 11 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays. He also, Wednesday evenings. That's right.
Yes.
And then also he has a fabulous newsletter. So
Yes.
connect
We can catch up.
with Charles. But listen, he's going to be back, and really consider, right? We have a lot of wonderful teachers. Notice if you resonated with what he said. Evaluate yourself. Where am I in this? Am I still looking? What am I, we have a different teacher every week, but if you're ready and you love Charles like I do and so many do, reach out and have a conversation with him. Charles, thank you again so much. We're going to close out right
My
now.
pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you
for having me.
I really appreciate, absolutely. And I am going to close out with a little more on the Telesummit that's coming up October 9th and 10th. And by the way, I have a couple of free tickets, just so you know. Bye, everybody. Thanks, Charles.